Well, I guess there's always something to complain about. Let's get started. Hi, hello, and welcome in to the Ball Don't Lie podcast. My name is Austin Elmore. I am your host. Thank you for being here. Thank you for spending a couple of minutes with me in the midst of I'm sure, chaotic, crazy, busy, a lot going on holiday week. And let me be the first to wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year and all that good stuff. It's going to be a short and sweet episode because there's not too much going on in the world of the Cincinnati Bengals. And of course, I too have a busy holiday week just like you. So let's start with what happened over the weekend. The Bengals stomped the Miami Dolphins 45-21. And I was fascinated to see, based off the episode that I did a week ago, how the Bengals would respond. Because based off of the week ago game against Baltimore and my thoughts on it and the way I shared it in the podcast, I told you it felt like to me that the Bengals had quit on Zach Taylor and that they had really been eliminated, and it felt like this season was coming to a crashing end and it just wasn't going to go well, and it made me wonder about the future of this organization. And mainly made me wonder about the rest of this season. How is it all going to play out? I was curious to see what it would look like against the Dolphins. Now, the Dolphins were starting Quinn Ewers, who was making his first career NFL start. They are down a couple of guys like Matthew Judon. They let him go. They had some injuries. They weren't 100%. They had been eliminated the week before as well. They are looking at a lot of different things in the future of the Dolphins franchise as they search for a GM and is their head coach going to stay and yada, yada, yada. So they had benched Tua Tagovailoa, and there's all this stuff going on with Miami. I didn't think they were going to be a team that the Bengals were going to blow out. I thought they would play the Bengals tough, especially because of Devin Achane and that offense and the way that they run the football. I did not think this was going to be an easy game for the Bengals by any stretch of the imagination, especially based off the way they played last week. And what I saw from Cincinnati was a dominant performance. Joe Burrow comes out, throws for 300 yards, 4 touchdowns. Chase Brown scores 3 touchdowns, 1 on the ground, 2 through the air. T. Higgins returns to his old self. Jamar Chase looks like Jamar Chase. The offensive line protects pretty doggone well. Drew Sample had a 30-yard reception. Mike Gesicki scores a touchdown against his old team. And the defense forces 3 turnovers, 4 if you count a 4th and short stop. And all of a sudden you're reminded, oh yeah, this is what it could have felt like. This is what it was supposed to look like. And that's kind of my problem with the response. Now, I made peace with the fact that the Bengals weren't going to make the playoffs a while ago. I think the writing was pretty clear. It was right up there on the wall. I've said it on this show. I've said it on the radio. I've thought they were dead for a while. And even though they had a minuscule hope and chance, and I acknowledge that, I didn't really think it was ever a possibility. And so I'd come to peace with that a long time ago. And it became, okay, what are we learning about next year's Bengals through this year's Bengals? And after the bye week, we've seen marginal, small improvements from the defense. We've seen some players play a little bit better. DJ Turner, Dax Hill, Jordan Battle, Demetrius Knight, okay. Miles Murphy continues to shine. Joseph Osai has played well. All those things. Well, Osai didn't play on Sunday against the Dolphins, but Zach Taylor at halftime against Miami challenged the Bengals defense to go get turnovers. And what did they do? They forced a fumble. They forced 2 interceptions. They got the 4th down stop. The Bengals scored 28 points off those turnovers, including outscoring Miami 21-0 in the third quarter. Overall, the energy, the effort, the execution, the 3 E's that you look for every week in the National Football League, the Bengals had every single one of those. And that's an impressive response to what happened a week ago. It's an impressive response when you're eliminated from playoff contention. With all the stuff that's been going on with Burrow, with all the distractions, they came out and played focused, they played clean, and were very rarely penalized. They played great football and beat an inferior opponent on the road. That is a positive. But the response has basically been, well, that's what it's supposed to look like, or that's what it should have looked like. Well, too bad it doesn't matter, and they can't play when it matters, and blah, 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 blah. Well, listen, as I said, I came to grips with the fact that the Bengals weren't going to the playoffs a long time ago, and so I've been into evaluation mode. this is what it's supposed to look like. Like, everybody knows this is how it was supposed to be. And they were this close on a lot of different occasions if they had gotten that one extra stop or that one extra turnover for them to be in playoff contention, but they're not. And they're 5-10, and your record is what it is, and you are what your record says you are at this point in the season. I'm not denying that at all. But can we not at least be happy that the Bengals actually performed to the standard that we have for them? Now, the standard is much higher than going 5-10 and trying to finish 7-10 on the season. We all know that. We all agree with that. Especially with Joe Burrow, the standard is a lot higher. Well, the standard that they played to last week against Baltimore is nowhere near the standard. The standard that they played against Buffalo was close to the standard, but not quite. The standard was the way they played against Baltimore a couple of weeks ago on Thanksgiving. They haven't always met that standard. They did on Sunday. The standard is high-level execution, forcing turnovers, complimentary football, and blowing out teams you're supposed to blow out. They did that, and I give them credit for that, especially responding and playing in a game that meant nothing for their playoff hopes, for them to come out and be as dominant, aggressive, energetic, and give as much effort as they did. They deserve a ton of credit. Especially T. Higgins, which turns out to be my favorite story from this week. Higgins had another concussion in the Buffalo game, and it was unclear whether or not he would be able to play this week, and he had gone through the protocol and all this other stuff, and a lot of people would have understood if T. Higgins is just like, okay, I'm done for the year, not going to mess with the head injury, not going to do all this nonsense, I'm done. I would have been cool with that. I'm sure a lot of people would have been cool with that. But T. Higgins, going through the process and taking care of himself and going through the concussion protocol that the NFL is a part of, goes through and clears all the obstacles. Bengals also order him a new helmet that makes him a little bit more comfortable, provides a little bit more padding. And the Bengals recommend to him going to a concussion specialist in Pittsburgh to get a second opinion and see if that makes him feel any better. So the Bengals send him out to Pittsburgh. He goes and sees this concussion specialist, and he clears him. And T said that gave him peace of mind to be able to go out and play. And on top of that, new helmet came in just in time for them to play in Miami. So T goes out and plays. He plays great. 3 catches, 53 yards, a touchdown, a couple of long completions. And it's a reminder of just how good this offense can be when all 3 of those guys are on the field at the same time. Jamar was excellent. Burrow was nearly perfect. Higgins was there. And oh, by the way, while you're worrying about those 3, here comes Chase Brown and here comes Mike Gesicki. This is what it's supposed to look like. It's unfortunate that we've seen very few snaps with all 3 of those guys on the field so far this season. It's also interesting that this was the first game in the career of Joe Burrow in the National Football League that he played while the Bengals were out of playoff contention. Now, you can go back to his rookie year in 2020. I believe they were 2-5-1 at the time of his knee injury. Might have been 2-6-1. So they weren't going to the playoffs that year, but they weren't eliminated at that point in time, and he was playing some pretty good football in Washington prior to being injured. So they were alive then. They obviously went to the Super Bowl in 21, back to the AFC title game in 22. They were very much alive in 23 when Burrow went down with the wrist injury. They were alive up until the very last day of the season in 24, and alive up until last week against Baltimore. So this is the first game Joe Burrow has played in the NFL in which they weren't alive in the playoff hopes or in playoff contention. And I was curious to see how Burrow responded. And he played great. Looked like he was having fun. He said after the game that this is what it's supposed to feel like. This is having fun. It's fun to play football. And it really can be that simple. But I've just been bothered by the idea that people are so upset that, yeah, well, it's too late. And they, shouldn't. It doesn't matter, and they hurt their draft stock, which, by the way, that's not true. They entered the game in Miami picking 9th in next year's NFL draft, and the win, they still are picking 9th in next year's NFL draft. So that win didn't hurt them in terms of their draft order whatsoever, and people are all upset about the fact that it's too little too late. And I get it. We should all be angry at not reaching the standard and not reaching the postseason, but hey, man, they still played up to the standard in Miami and beat a team they were supposed to beat. And that's what matters. And I'm going to choose to be happy about that. I want them to win. There's a debate out there about which is more important. Winning games, which is more important for culture. Winning games or draft picks. And I think there is a value in both. I think if Zach Taylor is going to be the guy moving forward, and if Joe Burrow is going to be healthy, and this season is going to give you that opportunity to play these last few games with all your stars healthy, the culture is a huge part. The culture is built on winning football games, much like they did at the end of 2020. I think the culture is built on winning football games, even against teams that you're supposed to beat and teams that may not be in playoff contention late in the season. And so I do think there's value in these games. I think there's value in winning these games. And as for me personally, I don't believe in tanking for a draft pick if you already have a franchise quarterback. I just don't think that's a wise move. A couple of milestones were met over the weekend in Cincinnati with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. How about this from Joe Burrow? He reached 20,000 career passing yards. He's the 5th fastest quarterback to do that in NFL history. Kind of amazing when you consider how many games Burrow has missed, that he's already up to 20K passing yards. He also went over 150 career touchdown passes, did Joe Burrow, so congrats to him. Meanwhile, Jamar Chase, 500 career receptions. He's the 2nd fastest in NFL history to do that. He did it in just 76 games. And Jamar was also awarded this week by being named to the Pro Bowl. 5 years in the NFL. 5 Pro Bowls for Jamar Chase. Congrats to him. By the way, Pro Bowl games being switched up this year. They're going to be played during Super Bowl week in San Francisco or Santa Clara, leading up to Super Bowl 60 out there on the West Coast. That pretty much is it. Like I said, it's a short and sweet week when it comes to the content and stuff going on. The Bengals host the Arizona Cardinals this week at Paycor Stadium. The weather is looking halfway decent. I mean, it's 60 degrees in Cincinnati right now as I'm recording this. So it certainly won't be as brutal as it was the last time the Bengals took the field at Paycor Stadium up against Arizona. And I'm just continue to be curious. What are the building blocks? How do those building blocks perform over the last few weeks? Even though it's not against the best competition, there is still something that you can learn from young players getting opportunities in games like this that can help determine and chart your path forward into the offseason. And there will be a lot to work on in the offseason for the Bengals this year. All right, that's it for me. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to the podcast, share it with someone, follow it wherever you get your podcasts. I would really appreciate it. You can also subscribe to the channel on YouTube if you want to see clips, videos, any of that. The video portion of the podcast is also available. It's at Ball Don't Lie Pod on YouTube. You can also follow me on any and all social media at Auty Elmore. That's AUTYELMORE. Thank you so much for listening. As always, have fun, be safe, go Bucks.